Good afternoon to you. 506 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, we've got Congressman Bob Good joining us from Virginia. He's a member of the Freedom Caucus, the House Budget Committee. He voted yesterday to oust Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He gave a floor speech as to why. We'll ask him to share his thoughts here on WMAL. That's coming up. And also what comes next, who's going to become the next speaker. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Let's check in on the phone lines. We've got our friend Radu from Potomac calling in on line 4. Radu, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Vince. I have, as you know, I'm a diehard Republican. Many times we make fun of third world nations and we call them banana republics. Well, that's exactly what we were yesterday, watching that thing unfold. It is the banana republic. The fact that one guy, I know it's 8, but really one guy manages to throw everything out of whack, where for 1 week right now we can't even manage the country. It is just pathetic, all right? Now, I'm not a big fan of Kevin McCarthy, but it used to be you remember 25, 30 years ago when you had Newt Gingrich together with Bill Clinton, they got together and they got bills passed. That used to work. Nowadays, when you talk to the other side, you are the Antichrist.
Right.
Now, and you know that I don't believe anything that the Democrats say. You know that I lived under communism. You know that to me, for 40 years, I've said that the Democrats are at best socialist, in many ways borderline communist. I've said that for 40 years.
Yes.
But what happened yesterday is pathetic.
So do you, Radu, why were you embarrassed by it, though? What would lead you on a personal level to be embarrassed by this?
It makes our party look like we do not know, and I don't think we know how to govern. I think that I looked at it, and I looked at that Matt Gaetz, who's actually during the whole exhibition yesterday, he's actually raising money for himself. I'm sorry, but that is pathetic.
So,
and the
do
one
you
thing
think
you got to give the Democrats.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your thought. I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to ask you questions about it.
The one thing that you got to give the Democrats, okay, as much as I totally dislike them, is when Nancy Pelosi brought something on to be voted on, you knew that it was going to pass. You know that they all hold in line behind each other. This guy, I don't have words to describe how disappointed I am with somebody like Matt Gaetz, who because he's upset with Kevin McCarthy because he did not support him in his problems that he had with the court system. He's doing this.
Okay, so neither of us know for sure, though, Radu, what animates all of these guys, and obviously it could be a multitude of factors, including personal animus. But I really resent the people who have come out and said, "Oh, it's just a personal fight," and Gaetz doesn't like him for petty tabloid reasons. I don't know if you listen to Matt Gaetz on any of the 6,000 interviews that he's done over the course of the past few weeks, every single one of them were full of all sorts of policy explanations for why he had discontent with Kevin McCarthy, in particular that he failed up to live to the promises to do what you talked about, Radu, which is to go back to the era of 1996, Bill Clinton, Newt Gingrich, pass a budget on time. That's what he's been talking about. And Vince, one second, Radu, let me just make these points, and then I'll let you respond to them. And I've heard a lot of people make this point, too, which is like, how could 8 people, or in this case 1, as you pointed out, kind of like control the Speaker of the House? How can anybody be Speaker if that's the situation you're in? And the answer to that is they can't do that unless the margins are that thin. In other words, the only way that they have this much power is that Republicans haven't made a case deserving of a massive majority in the United States House of Representatives. They don't have.
I agree, Vince.
They don't have the
agree
runway
with you
space.
100%.
Radu, I know you do, Radu. Let me just make the point, though. I don't want to talk over each other. So if they do that, if they can actually convince the public that they're worth voting for, that they're going to be different than the other guys, that they're going to actually return the country to something worth being proud of, that they're going to fight, as you point out so rightly, so frequently, the communist tendencies of the left, that's how they get the kind of majority where you can have differences of opinion and not have such close margins that lead to a threat against Kevin McCarthy like we saw play out yesterday.
Hey, Vince, I'm one of those people that said, many people are saying, oh, well, we did well in the last elections because we got the House. I said that wasn't a win for me as far as I'm concerned. I expected to win by 25, 30 seats. So
right.
You're absolutely correct. The point is, and I'll let you go because I know there are other people waiting. The point is very simple to me. It's the fact that right now, in 42 days, we're going to be in the exact same spot we are today because we are going to wait till the last minute, and then they're going to say, oh, maybe you need another 45 days.
Let me ask you something, Radu.
We do not govern anymore.
Radu, I have to ask you something, though, because of your personal experience.
Yes.
That plays a factor here. You're a survivor of communism. You speak so much about it coming out of Romania. When you look at a guy like Kevin McCarthy, do you think he recognizes the moment we're in as a country right now? Do you trust him in particular to be the one Republican leader in charge in government at this moment in our history?
Look, as I said, I'm not a huge fan, okay? I don't think, but on the other hand, I don't think we have many other choices right now. But for instance, one quick thing about Kevin McCarthy. Now, we keep on talking about Ukraine right now. I'm a big supporter of Ukraine. I'm against the Russians because I think they're at fault. So I totally support Ukraine. But I don't believe we should give them any more money. We gave them $100 billion. I think that at some point it's enough. And he and Mitch McConnell are very big in favor of keep on opening the book. And we borrowing money that we're paying interest for from China to give it to Ukraine. Like I said,
yes.
I support them. I'm behind them.
You want the dying to stop. I agree. All right. I'll let you go. Thank you very much for your time, like always. Of course. Radu, thank you for calling. All right. Let me see here. I've got Mike calling in from Sunshine now. He's on line 6. Mike, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, thanks for taking my call. I respectfully disagree with Radu. I'm very happy with what happened with regard to to what Matt Gaetz and the others did. The GOP side of the Uniparty is upset because the Uniparty has been monetizing political power at our expense for decades. And 8 or 9 people have said, okay, enough. Yes, what's her name, will get her caucus to shoot holes in the bottom of a boat, and they all salute and say, yes ma'am.
I thank you for bringing that up. I actually meant to, Radu said a lot. One of the things I wanted to say was if we look at the left and we go, man, look at the tyrannical control they have over their conference. I don't think that's something that the right should aspire to. I think robust debate about what's actually good for this country is worthwhile, and having the voters be a part of that, absolutely.
Correct. And, there's a lot of people on the Republican side of the ledger that are upset with Matt Gaetz, and I don't think it has to do with McCarthy not supporting him when he got into hot water. I just think it has to do with McCarthy not honoring some of the promises he made when he assumed the speakership. He cut a deal. Something's telling me that he's not been clear, or he has decided to not honor the deal that he
I still can't get over. Let me play some audio just because you're bringing it up, Mike. I can't get over this moment last night. McCarthy announced that he's not running for speaker again, and that's good. By the way, that's good for the country and good for him for making that decision yesterday. But then he made this point. He was angry at Nancy Pelosi because he said that she had promised that she would rescue him when he became speaker. Take a listen.
Interesting. It was in this room after we had won the majority. I hadn't become speaker last, and Nancy Pelosi came to me. She was speaker at the time on the way out. And I told her I was having issues with getting enough votes. And she said, what's the problem? I said, they want this one person can rule you out. She was the only speaker to have changed that rule. I had the power to call the vote on her, but I never would. I lost some votes because of it. And she said, just give it to him. I'll always back you up. I made the same offer to Boehner, And same thing to Paul, because I believe in the institution. I think today was a political decision by the Democrats.
Yeah, of course. But why would he trust her? Why would he trust her, Mike?
He can't trust her. And that's the fundamental. How did she keep her little private office for so long?
I know.
Come on.
Have you ever seen? And this is one of the features of Washington. They're never more angry than when they are personally offended. They're never more animated than when they're personally put upon. Right. So McCarthy today. Apparently the reporting here is that McCarthy is the guiding factor on this. But they're evicting these Democrats from these plush offices that they allowed them to keep when they lost the majority. So Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, everybody's being ejected now from these offices because McCarthy's on the warpath because they didn't keep up their end of the bargain to protect him. And I'm sitting there going, why can't you be this animated about us? Why do we have a border that's wide open and a Ukraine that's fully funded? How does that keep happening? After January 6th, what did they do? The events of January 6th. They walled up the United States Capitol. They did security theater. The idea that the ruling class would ever be threatened in any way, they couldn't abide. American cities, they can burn. The average person trying to figure out how to get to work without getting shot, make sure their kids are safe, maybe we'll get around to it. We'll put some funding out there or something. But for Nancy Pelosi and company, it's walls, it's tanks, it's National Guard. It's obscene, Mike. It's obscene.
Ukraine is a laundry machine, washing machine, laundering money, coming back to and the PACs have control of these uniparty GOP and Democrats. It's business as usual, monetizing political power.
I know.
It is. Yep.
Yeah, big time. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. And to further, let me just further stretch out this point a little bit on, look, if Matt Gaetz' entire thing was like, hey, I have a personal grudge against this guy because he didn't help me, whatever. I don't care. I don't actually care. I'm not here to judge Matt Gaetz' rationale, other than to say the things that he said in public about this, they resonate with me as it relates to this ridiculous practice we have in Washington, again, since 1996, of always passing continuing resolutions and omnibus spending bills. They use the lives of normal government workers, everyday government workers, and military members. They use them and they say, you know what? That staff sergeant's not going to receive a check. That private is not going to receive a check. They're going to go weeks without getting paid unless you fund all of these political priorities. What kind of priorities? I don't know. If you fund Planned Parenthood or you fund Ukraine or you fund this other adventure or you fund this thing, you've got to do all of it right now or else that staff sergeant isn't getting paid. And then they use these people as hostages. And they cram it all in at the end of the year. They slam through these massive spending packages. The only people who fundamentally write them are the special interests and the lobbyists, some of whom you and I might agree with, some of these special interests. They represent things that we might like, but there's plenty of people who represent stuff we don't. But it is not an open process. It's not an orderly process. And boy, is it a destructive process. We are $33 trillion in debt and growing. 20% of all of our expenditures are interest payment on the debt. That is only going to go up right now. And unless you're the kind of person who recognizes what time it is, can see what the calculator looks like, can realize that our children and our grandchildren are under great threat right now, if you're not that person, you are not equipped to actually be in a position of leadership in this country. You're not. You have to step aside. And so, Look, I said at the top, I'll say at the top of the program, I'll say it now. I woke up this morning with a sense of calm about what happened yesterday because I thought, you know what? This is going to yield something better. This is going to yield something better. Is it going to be massively better? No, it's impossible to say. You can't predict that. But it's almost the effect of a prison yard beatdown. You get there and you just beat up the biggest dude on the block. And everybody learns, you don't want to mess with that guy. They're rattled. These people are rattled. Even if Kevin McCarthy had figured out a way to get the job back, he would be rattled into compliance, and it would take him to the right. So the hysterics around this, I think, are just totally over the top. And just like every other one of these moments where everybody's screaming at you, you're supposed to think a certain way about this. Say, you know what? Back off. I'm going to think about this for myself. I'm going to assess it. I'm not going to collapse to your moral blackmail. And I'm going to, as I always do, pray for our country. Because I find That's the best way to go about this stuff. 521 now. Well, packed phones right now. Let me go to Joe in Woodbridge, line 5. Joe, good afternoon. You are on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, good afternoon, Vince. Hey, I didn't lose any sleep at all about the firing of McCarthy. This country was founded, by an armed revolution. So, I think this is just a big overreaction over a man losing his job because he was not doing his job. He's done nothing in the 10 months that he's had the job. He hasn't done anything on the border. He hasn't stopped the invasion of illegals. He's done nothing on fentanyl. He's been AWOL. I haven't heard him say one word on the indoctrination of our children, on the transgender lifestyle. The guy got fired because he wasn't doing his job. I'm happy about it.
All right, Joe, thank you very much. We'll talk to a member of Congress here in just a moment who will say why he thought McCarthy should go. Bob Good, one of just 8 Republicans yesterday to make that happen, but they succeeded. The congressman will be with us in a moment. Well, good afternoon to you. It's 5:34 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yesterday, the House floor, here's what Congressman Bob Good sounded like.
Our current debt and our spending trajectory is unsustainable. We need a speaker, ideally somebody who doesn't want to be speaker and hasn't pursued that at all costs for his entire adult life, who will meet the moment and do everything possible to fight for the country. A red line was crossed for me, I regret, on Saturday, and chose regret that I must vote against the motion to table as I did and to vote to vacate the chair.
Yeah, that's, again, Congressman Bob Good, one of 8 Republicans who voted against Kevin McCarthy yesterday, thus ousting him as Speaker of the House. We await Congressman Good. He will be joining us here. We assume momentarily. Congress isn't doing any work until next week, they say, so that means he's probably available. One hopes. But let me share some other audio with you while we wait. We've got Matt Gaetz yesterday. Here's his explanation before the vote. And he was accused of, you heard one of our callers pointed out earlier, Matt Gaetz was raising money. He's been sending out emails saying he's working to get rid of McCarthy and that you should support him and maybe contribute a couple of bucks. Here's Gaetz yesterday responding to criticism of that.
My colleague says we've passed the strongest border bills in history. Well, guess what? Look at the border right now. We didn't use sufficient leverage in the debt limit or in any other thing to actually get results on the border. The border is a disaster, really something I don't think you're going to be campaigning on, that you fix the border. Second, you said you streamlined regulations. What the gentleman from Louisiana doesn't tell you is that all of the regulatory reform he was just bragging about is waivable by the stroke of a pen of someone in the Biden White House. Do you really think you've got anything for that? It's a total joke. And then finally, the welfare to work that the gentleman from Louisiana said we got. The welfare programs that they said that they streamlined with their welfare to work stuff, they're actually going to grow. Because while they did work requirements, they blew out those programs with expanded eligibility. I'm real glad you guys didn't put work requirements on Medicaid. It probably would have resulted in Medicaid expansion. And when it comes to how those raise money, I take no lecture on asking patriotic Americans to weigh in and contribute to this fight from those who would grovel and bend knee for the lobbyists and special interests who own our leadership, who have, boo all you want, who have hollowed out this town and have borrowed against the future of our future generations. I'll be happy to fund my political operation through the work of hardworking Americans, $10 and $20 and $30 at a time, and you all keep showing up at the lobbyist fundraisers and see how that goes for you. I reserve.
Man, some hot words yesterday. It ended up with Speaker McCarthy being thrown out of the gig. Here to talk more about how that all went down, Congressman Bob Good from Virginia's 5th Congressional District joins us now. Congressman, good to have you with us, sir.
Great to be with you, Vince. Thanks for having me again.
Bring me back to yesterday. I know you gave some speeches on the floor. We just played some audio from it, but give us a sense of why it is that you decided it was time for McCarthy to go.
Well, you have to go back to January, where, for 14 votes, I voted against Speaker McCarthy, and the thing that I most referenced was we could not continue the failures of the past, where when we were entrusted by the American people with Republican majorities, we passed all the major spending bills with predominantly a majority of Democrat votes, and the country just couldn't sustain that. And unfortunately, that's what we did with the debt ceiling I'll say negotiation to use that term loosely, the debt ceiling capitulation, where we haven't agreed to an unconditional or unlimited increase of the debt ceiling through January 25, as much as we can come together and spend, which Congress is wonderful about spending other people's money. It'll take us to 35, 36 trillion easily by January 25. Then we failed to bring our 12 spending bills to the floor as Speaker, not even to pass them, but even to bring them to the floor, as Speaker McCarthy committed to do. And that was because he didn't want to keep his commitment to cutting back to the pre-COVID spending levels for non-defense discretionary, as he committed to do to become Speaker, and as he committed to the entire conference. And then he refused to allow us to bring our balanced budget that I helped pass out of our budget committee to the floor for a vote. That still has not happened. And then the culmination was failure theater repeated once again with the continuing resolution this past Saturday, where Democrats voted 209-1 in the House and 51-0 in the Senate to pass McCarthy's CR to keep all the Biden, Pelosi, Schumer policies that are destroying the country, spending that's bankrupting our kids and grandkids, in place for another 45 days to set us up for another CR 45 days from now on our way to an omnibus, all along to blame and to deflect and to say, oh, it's the conservatives' fault because they're so radical in their demands that they have consistently tried to hold me to cutting $100 billion out of a $2 trillion deficit this year, as he committed to do back in January.
Congressman Good, one of the features of McCarthy's time as Speaker, it always felt like he was trying to keep conservatives at bay or to kind of toss some red meat out to convince them that he was on their side. An example of that I always think about is when he went to the border and threatened to begin impeachment proceedings against Alejandro Mayorkas. He said, resign or we will have to consider impeaching you. But up until this date, Alejandro Mayorkas is still in the job, and there is no impeachment proceeding against him. Is there?
Yes, he does. He's good at theater. He's good at, speeches and that sort of thing. And right around the time when he was trying to become Speaker, he talked tough that we were going to impeach Mayorkas. We've heard nothing about that since from the Speaker. Just like when he thought, okay, I'm going to fail on the spending bills, maybe I'll have the impeachment inquiry, make it look like I'm actually going to follow through on that. And maybe that'll cause the conservatives to stop criticizing and attacking me or threatening me because I'm going to fail on the spending, the number one thing that's the responsibility of the House.
Can I ask, Congressman, is that impeachment inquiry meaningfully different than the work that those three committees were doing in the first place?
An official inquiry does give you greater subpoena power, greater investigative power. It makes it more difficult for the Biden administration to fail to respond to your efforts to conduct oversight.
So you think it's legit? You think that there is something to that impeachment inquiry?
I don't think if he had remained Speaker that he would have ever signed off on impeachment. But the inquiry is a tool to build the case more effectively. But you know what? We don't need more investigation to find out we got 7 million illegals in the country, 1.5 million of them the gotaways who don't want the free stuff that we're giving showering every other illegal. For that reason alone, he should have impeached or led us to impeaching Joe Biden. We're going to let that continue and just fuss about it a little bit and wring our hands and do nothing. He should have shut everything down until Biden secured the border. Fight for that. We're not going to get everything when you got one house of one branch of government, but you can get something.
Yes.
You get something. And it's just unsustainable to continue the track that we were on.
So Matt Gaetz had indicated ahead of this vote that he would be open to supporting Steve Scalise, potentially. He hasn't committed firmly to anybody, but among the people who have thrown their hat into the ring to become Speaker are Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan. Congressman Good, could you see yourself supporting either one of those two men?
Well, I will, out of respect to the candidates, I will not say that I might support one of them because that would probably make 150 of my upset colleagues right now say, okay, we can't consider them because Good's for them. No, but in all seriousness, I want to see us vet the candidates, test the candidates, challenge the candidates, meet with them in small groups and individually between now and Tuesday's forum. We're going to have a competition instead of a contest. A competition and a contest, not a coronation like we've had in the past, where you just rubber stamp the presumptive winner, the party choice, the leader's anointed person, so to speak.
Yes.
We're going to have a real contest. And frankly, that will unify us because we will have to come together. And as tough as it may be, And as disparate as we may be when we enter the room, we'll have to get 218, hopefully 221, make it unanimous when we bring it to the House floor. And then we will all have a vested interest in that speaker's success because we will own that person because we voted for that person. Plus, the country needs the speaker to be successful. So we're not going to find the perfect person. It might not be who Vince would want or who Bob would want if you're going to pick one out of 435. But I guarantee they're going to be tougher, more of a fighter, have greater integrity, and more closely reflect the conservative base that's the center of the conference and be a partner with us to a greater degree than what we've had to this point with the leaders and the speakers in recent years.
I guess
so. I think there's about a half a dozen. I think that are putting out feelers and trying to throw their hat in the ring, and we'll see who actually emerges as formal candidates on Tuesday.
Totally. But one of the things I'm kind of on guard for, and I imagine a lot of people are, is you throw Kevin McCarthy out for being an establishment guy who didn't keep his promises and didn't move to restore normal order to the House as much as he should have. There's going to be other candidates, I presume, who are basically very close to McCarthy who will almost be carbon copies. And I don't know if Steve Scalise is that guy. I'm not sure if he is or not. I think a lot of people have a lot of good feelings for Steve Scalise, especially because of what he went through. A Democrat tried to murder him on a baseball field, and nobody likes to see that at all. But at the same time, we want to make sure somebody effective gets in there, don't we?
We do indeed. And again, I don't want to talk about specific candidates prematurely. What is for me, I feel prematurely. But I will tell you that the unfortunate reality is with 221 that it takes to get 218 and the fact that to rise to some level of prominence and stature and influence and credibility with the conference in terms of position, unfortunately, you have to be part of the system.
Yeah.
And so it would be very difficult. Let's just throw a name out. Say a Chip Roy, a courageous conservative warrior who's one of the most effective members of Congress, in my view, or an Andy Biggs, what a principled leader he is. Those would have great difficulty, if not impossible, opportunity to become Speaker just because of the way that they have fought and they've challenged the establishment. They've challenged the status quo. So it'd be difficult for those to rise to that level. So we are probably have a pragmatic approach and realize, okay, let's have an upgrade. At least that person will know they wouldn't be Speaker if it weren't for individuals who went to the mat to force a change.
Yep.
And they know that hopefully we'd never have to do this again. Hopefully never have to do it again. But if forced to, because they retain the trust of the American people, then there's accountability there.
Yeah,
which is an important. Fear is a good motivator for everybody.
For sure, and I know you're trying to avoid talking about specific candidates, but I can't help but say, at least for my part, that what you just described sounds a lot like Jim Jordan, the kind of guy who was a House Freedom Caucus founder. He's conservative. He's well liked on the conservative side of the aisle, the establishment side of the aisle. Clearly, the leadership likes him. He stood up for Kevin McCarthy and on the course of these past few votes, both to become Speaker and to defend him. I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Jordan becomes a leading candidate to become the next Speaker.
Well, without discussion, you've named two individuals who obviously get a close look for a lot of people.
Right.
Leader Scalise, because he's the number two, of course, and Mr. Jordan for the reasons that you outlined. I'm sure they will consideration from a lot of people.
Let me. Were you surprised yesterday that Kevin McCarthy announced last night that he would take his name out of the running? Was that a surprise to you?
I didn't know. It was somewhat of a surprise just because, this is the one thing that he has fought for. And the one thing where he's refused, at least back in January, to give up on. And so it was clear to me after when I went into a meeting with a larger number of members that they were united that, hey, it was over for him. It was going to be a much, much, much larger number than anything close to 8, much, much larger, and I believe well into the dozens and dozens. So I don't know if he heard that, recognized that, was told that, or if he just didn't want to go through it, or if he just realized, hey, the 8 are rock solid. There's nothing I can do to change them, and there wouldn't have been anything. So I don't know what the reason was. I was glad that he did, just for the sake of the conference and for the country to move forward, and not to have to go through that. And so I appreciate that he did. I appreciate and respect that he's worked very hard to get where he is. I mean, there's no question. I don't think anybody ever would begrudge him that he hasn't done that. We just had disagreements on policies and strategies and the best way to get there for the country.
Did you think it was odd that he claimed last night that he thought he would survive because he would have Nancy Pelosi's support? Pelosi had told him that they could lower the motion to vacate to one vote just fine. Go ahead and do that, she said. In order to placate the conservatives who were trying to force him to make that concession. She said, if it comes to that, I'll be there to support you. And boy, was she not there to support him yesterday.
Yeah, I hadn't, of course, heard anything about that until hearing it on a news report today, and I'll just say that was interesting.
Yeah, it's wild. Well, McCarthy's letting her have it now because they took away her office. They evicted her and Steny Hoyer.
One either till then, and they ought to be treated like every other member, and not. Maybe they should retire by now in their 80s, but they certainly shouldn't be getting special privileges or treatment. They ought to be like any other member who holds whatever position they do or don't hold. So,
amen.
I got to step into a meeting, Vince. It's so good to be with you, and I appreciate your support and encouragement. I appreciate you being in the fight.
Congressman Bob Good, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today.
That's you.
Congressman Good of Virginia joining us in his busy day to talk about some of this. But it's just amazing, right? I mean, I am still stunned by that. He really thought that Pelosi was going to come through for him. Pelosi doesn't come through for unborn babies. Why would she come through for Kevin McCarthy? Not a chance of that happening. Man, let's take Marshall in Southern Maryland now. Line 6. Marshall, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello.
Hey, buddy. Just a couple quick questions. One, I wanted to know if McCarthy was in the room when Pelosi said nay, right? And then to see what his facial expression might have been. Two, that I also do agree with McCarthy getting booted out of one ambition that's going to incentivize the next person that gets elected, and as well, I think it's more about all the things he did behind his party's back without final resolution. Like your guest said earlier, that before the ink even dried, McCarthy pulled a different move. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, we need more transparency and more results. I think that's the key. And look, there's no question as we talk about this issue that you've got, you're dealing with one half of one branch of government. So you make of that what you will. You have to be cognizant of what's achievable. But if you're going to make promises like passing 12 budget bills on time, do that. You should move heaven and earth to actually do that. And if you're going to say things like, hey, Alejandro Mayorkas, resign or we're going to impeach you, impeach the jerk. What is it? What kind of ultimatum is that? Then you do nothing? Do you do neither of those things? 5:51 now.
What about Ukraine? Are you willing to move forward with an aid package for Ukraine if you're speaker?
I'm against that. What I understand is at some point we're going to have to deal with this appropriation process in the right way. And we're going to try to do that in the next, what are we down to, 41 days. The most pressing issue on Americans' mind is not Ukraine. It is the border situation, and it is crime on the streets.
That's Jim Jordan in his case for why he should become the next speaker, talking on CNN today, saying, no, not a Ukraine package. We need a border package. Let's go to Greg calling in from Castle Rock. Line 9. Greg, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. We don't have much time left, do we?
Not much, but go for it, Greg.
Well, I have been upset ever since the first vote on the speaker. As I told your call-in screener, I had worked for 5 Republican members of Congress.
Yeah.
Back in from the 80s to the 90s. And the entire thing that's being reported on all the news stations and how they're blaming the aide when it is the primary responsibility of the speaker to have the votes before he brings the bill to the floor.
Right.
And if they block the adoption of a rule, it's because one of the promises that was made for that rule, for the bill, an amendment to it, wasn't honored. So, of course, they were going to vote against it.
Yeah. Yeah, so in other words, this is predictable, and the media is missing it entirely. Well, that's not the first time. That happens, every minute of every day. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate the call. The great one, Mark Levin, up next.